Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show with your host, Phil Tarrant.
G'day everyone, welcome to the Smart Property Investor Show. Pleasure to have you with us. I guess you're part of this community. Everyone's part of this community of property investors. The one commonality in property investors, irrespective of the strategy or where you're buying or your financing, is we're all in this together. We've all got a vested interest in making sure that our property markets continue to perform and provide value to us as people seeking wealth creation. I don't know anyone that invests in property to lose money. I think everyone invests in property to try and make a few bucks. So it is a common thread amongst all property investors. The best property investors I know are those which you continue to educate and understand different market nuances and cycles so they can best gear themselves to take advantage irrespective of what's happening. And we're in a market right now dominated with a lot of narrative and speak around the Sydney, Melbourne markets. I think a lot of people forget that Australia represents thousands and thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of different real estate markets, different pockets. So it does get dominated by the two big capital cities for good reason, I guess. It's where most of the population sits. They're the centres of finance and business for many of our different industries. So rightfully, Sydney and Melbourne get a lot of airplay. But you know what we do and what we like to do at Smart Property Investment is make sure that we're covering all of Australia and we touch on all the different cities and suburbs right across this great nation of ours. But let's have a chat about Sydney and Melbourne today in particular. And the guest in the studio is going to be able to help us navigate what's going on in some of these markets as well. But we'll kick off with what we know, Sydney and Melbourne. Rich Harvey from Property Buyer. How you going, mate? You well?
Very well, Phil. Great to be on your show again.
I can't remember the last time we got together.
It's too long. Way too long. A long time between drinks, so about time.
Have we spoken about your television
No, I don't
appearance?
think we have. That's why I've been distracted this year.
Yeah.
2018's been a huge year for me. So doing that show, Buying Blind, that was on Channel 9.
Blind.
Yeah.
Good experience?
Oh, wonderful experience.
Yeah.
It was quite a trek filming it. It took over 5 months of filming for those 6 episodes.
5 months of filming for 6 episodes.
Yeah, a lot of time out there. But there were 6 couples. For those that didn't see the show or don't watch television, only listen to podcasts and only quality podcasts on your show.
Oh,
for those that
all
don't
you need
know,
these days. You don't need TV no more, Rich.
For those that didn't watch it, the concept of the show was there were 6 couples that signed up to be buyers on this show. They handed over their money under what's called a power of attorney and gave me their brief and said, Rich, go and buy me my home. I've got a budget of $1.2 million or whatever their budget was.
Yeah.
And then after they gave me the brief, I didn't see them again until I handed them the keys to their home. So they were literally buying blind. So I had to go and find the home. Shana and Marshall, the builder and the designer, did a great job of renovating the home, and then we handed over their home.
It's a good concept. I saw bits of it.
Did you?
I must admit that
Did you
I
like
fast forward. I actually fast forward the bits were about sort of dying. I went, oh, there's Rich. Let's see what he's got to say.
Get the result.
You seem to know what you're talking about. But it was a good experience. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I did. It was quite a challenge. I mean, because normally when I'm buying a property for a client, I get constant feedback. I'll take them out. We shortlist some properties and, Mary and Joe, what do you think about this property? Do you like this one? Or if it's an investor, here are the numbers. But I wasn't able to have that interaction with the clients. So it was a very different process.
So essentially you completely commoditized the buying process in that this is what I want and you just deliver it.
That's right, 100%. So and what was super challenging was that the timing that when I had to buy these properties. So I auditioned for the show, or not auditioned, but engaged for the show at the end of October last year.
Yep.
So I had to start buying the properties sort of November, December, January, which is no properties around, and then ended up buying the last one in April this year. So the market at the end of last year, particularly in Melbourne, was still warm. It hasn't actually hit the sort of slowdown packet. So there was very little property, still competitive. So it was a very challenging time. So I had to dig really deep with my aging context to get the right properties there.
Would you prefer to be doing that exercise now?
I would love to be doing it now.
Okay.
Honestly.
We'll get into that. We'll chat about the market, but how'd you go? So 6, owner occupiers, not investors.
6 out of 6, and as much as there was great drama and whatever on the show, we got big smiles and big hugs and congratulations from all the couples. They absolutely were thrilled with their homes.
Were they happy from an emotional perspective or from a financial perspective?
All kinds of perspectives from both. I think one, it was for a lot of them, it was the relief of actually getting into the market. Like there were two of them were first home buyers. For the Liz and Alley down in Melbourne, they'd been busting their gut. They only had a really small budget of just under $600,000 to buy their first home. They were just tears streaming out. They couldn't believe they cracked the market. Yeah. Others just didn't have the time. Others felt they were priced out of the markets they were trying to buy into. From financial sense, obviously they got my service for free. They got Shana's design service for free and the builder service for free. So they got some some nice freebies thrown in there. But obviously the value of the properties they bought increased. So there's some equity uplift that they got through that process.
That's really cool.
Very fortunate.
Is it going to be another series? Don't know.
I don't know at this stage, so I'm not sure.
Would you do it again?
If they ask me, possibly.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's a competitive marketplace right now. You actually I've spoken to you about this, and for those that don't know, Rich has been a long-term friend of Smart Property Investment. We've known Rich for many years. Rich has been in this game for so long, and this is not a plug by any means, but he actually has the URL buyer's agent, don't you?
No, property buyer.
Property buyer,
propertybuyer.com.au. Yeah.
So you actually have the, okay, so that's how long he's been there. So you've been doing
years
17 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're one of the sort of early
adopters.
Right. of buyer's agency. And today, Rich, he's the president of REBA, which is a Real Estate Buyers Association. He also chairs the buyer's agent chapter of REI, New South Real Estate Institute of New South Wales. So, obviously people think you must know what you're talking about.
Well, they're actually two voluntary roles. Just to explain, I don't get paid for doing those roles. They consume a lot of my time, but I'm a big believer in giving back to the industry and particularly raising standards, which I know you're very supportive of as well. But we really need to, both of these organisations, they're promoting professionalism and promoting greater accreditation. One of the things I've been able to do through the Real Estate Institute is get buyers agents recognised on the front page of the contract of sale. We lobbied for years and years for the Law Society to recognise buyers agents, and finally we got it through. Big thing I'm lobbying for now is improved accreditation and licensing standards for buyers agents.
Okay.
The government's trying to dumb it down. We're trying to ramp it back up again. So we think there should be at least a 2-year apprentice scheme before people can get their full real estate licence.
And is that a lobbying sort of
the lobbying
exercise?
Guys? Yeah, okay. Absolutely. And I'm also trying to get a definition of the term buyer's agent or buyer's advocate in the regulation. See, at the moment, the term buyer's advocate or agent is not defined within the Act. It just talks about agent. Okay. So we have there's a potential for huge conflicts of interest for real estate agents that operate as selling agents on Monday and Tuesday, and then the rest of the week they become buying agents. Yeah. So we really need to have a clear definition in the Act of which side of the fence do you sit on and how are you remunerated.
So should that be a question you ask a potential buyer's agent whether or not they sell property as well?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay. And it's okay to ask that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ask them how they generate their fees. Ask them, are you completely independent? I mean, under the licensing laws, you can act as both a buying and selling agent, but not on the same transaction. Yeah. That's the clear distinction. If you do that, you're double dipping. That's illegal. You cannot do that. Okay. But I still think it's important for consumers to be aware of what service provider they're actually employing. Are they employing someone who's exclusively acting as a buyer's agent every day of the week? Or are they using a selling agent that perhaps happens some days to go and source properties for people?
So we're very pro-advice here at Smart Property Investment, and as an investor myself, building an A-team around you, buyers agents, accountants, brokers, financial planners, whoever it is, right? Big fan of it, and I advocate it. That doesn't say you can't go and do it yourself. You've got the time, inclination, education, ability to go and do it yourself. Go and do it yourself. That's cool. You've been in this game 17 years. There is this cadre of new buyers agents coming online, which is great for the industry, I think. Moving forward, when you look at the US model, you typically have an advocate on both the buyers and the seller's side who do the transaction for you. So they don't really call them buyers agents in America. They're just
buyers representatives.
They're just part of the ecosystem,
That's right?
And I still don't know what percentage of properties transact with the use of a buyer's agent in Australia. Do you know that number?
In Australia, There's no actual definitive numbers. I'd say it's less than 3%, to be honest with you.
It's less than 3%.
I reckon it is. It's still a very small number. So I guess the scope in our sector, it's still a very much a small, I call cottage industry. Yeah. So my biggest competitor is not other buyer's agents. It's just people wanting to do it on their own and not aware of this service being available.
So you think it's a good thing then that there's this I'll call it a groundswell. It's a fair bit of it going on now of people coming into wanting to choose being a buyer's agent as not yet deemed a profession. I imagine you'll go there at some point, but
absolutely,
I guess it's a career.
It's good. It's good and bad at the same time. It's good in the sense that there's more awareness of it. The only concern is that new entrants coming into the industry are appropriately licensed and more importantly have the right experience. Because it's very easy. You see a lot of people who've been mortgage brokers or whatever other industry they've come from suddenly go, hey, I'll be a buyer's agent. But it takes many, many years of understanding how to search properties, how to read people, understanding buyer psychology to actually deliver a really good quality buyer's agent service. It's not something you learn overnight or even in a couple of months. It does take a long period of time. So
what do you reckon is a fair length of time as an investor, a consumer, to when I appoint a buyer's agent to actually know I'm actually getting a good one? Like, can you have 6 months in the game and be a good buyer's agent?
Again, look at their track record. I suggest that, again, this is why we're lobbying with government. We believe that people should have at least 2 years practical experience. Yeah. As part of, to be a REBA member, you come on as a learner member or a provisional member, and it takes 2 years. Just like your normal real estate driver's license, you're on your Ps for 2 years, and then you get your green Ps. So we have the same kind of process in REBA that someone who comes on who hasn't been a practicing buyer's agent, they've got to be 2 years on their Ps, and then they get their full license.
And the people you see coming through this industry, by and large, pretty good?
Most of them are, yeah. We don't see too many. I mean, you hear the occasional story of people that haven't, through the grapevine, the person that hasn't been delivered the right service. But it's very important. I mean, you're dealing with a massive asset here. Most investment properties are around $500,000. So you've got to remember, when someone's appointing a buyer's agent, you're appointing them to act on your behalf. So they've got a very strong responsibility to find you the right property that's either going to set you up for improvement or set you up for failure.
Okay. I think we've done pretty well there.
That's good.
So if you're not using a buyer's agent, maybe think about it. It's completely up to you, and there's some pretty good resources out there to help you explore whether or not a buyer's agent would be right for you, Smart Property Investment being one of them. As I said before, we're pro advice. So me personally, I don't have the time or inclination to do this stuff myself, but also I'm a big fan of getting people to do stuff for me that I can do better myself, and I'm happy to pay for that privilege. So check it out, and hopefully the stuff that we're going to go through right now gives you a bit of an inside mind into how a buyer's agent's thinking. If you're not thinking this way, or you haven't even considered this stuff, it means that if you're buying investment property, you're up against guys like Rich Harvey, so or other buyer's agents. Really, it's what it is. It's competition,
Absolutely.
right? You want every advantage possible as an investor to make sure you're getting the right property. And if you buy a property, it means that that's the value of the property. Whether you paid over or not is up for you to work out.
Well, you know what, Phil? A lot of people don't realise they've paid over until many years down the track.
Yeah.
And you make your money when you buy. If you go at the right entry price, if you get it, for a cheaper than even below market value, happy days. You've got instant equity to go forward. But it's a long term perspective you've got to have with property.
And it's probably harder to buy well in a softening market than buying in a market that's rising. So if I think back to the Sydney market, 2012, 2013, you pretty much buy anything and you're probably done all right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
2012, it was just starting to turn. You could just start to see read the tea leaves and go, there's a bit of a groundswell of the market moving. 2013, but 2014, 15, 16, really big boom in both Sydney and Melbourne. We had price rises between 80 to almost 95% in both those capital cities. So left the other capitals for dead. I mean, Hobart's certainly been a bit of a strong performer, but by far and wide, the Sydney-Melbourne boom has been unprecedented.
And I look back at that and to the comment around, if you bought in Sydney or Melbourne during that period, you're probably done okay, right? I purchased a fair bit of property in Sydney during that period of time, and I've done well out of it. I think back to that period of time when I wasn't buying particular assets because it went $1,000 over what I set my limit to be, right? And I just went, at the time I went, oh, that's good buying. But you think back at that and just go, it just wouldn't have mattered, right? And even sort of spending money in a buyer's agent's fee during that period of time, it was a big chunk of money, but it probably didn't matter that much because the property was going up anyway. Where I think the true value, I'm not saying that wasn't value, the true value of using a buyer's agent in the city market, if I think back, was when to stop buying. Because that's when everyone else kept buying, and they find themselves where we are today.
Look, we went to auction many times. We always set a limit for our clients, particularly auction. We do a full appraisal for a client. And I think if anyone's doing it on their own, make sure you know your numbers before you go to the auction. Don't decide your limit on the day of the auction. Have your research completely done so you know you're not going to spend $1 over. Stick to your limit. And during the boom, we just saw emotional buyers just pay stupid prices.
Money.
It was ridiculous, and particularly some foreign buyers would come in and just keep putting up the flag, and it was putting up the number and just it was crazy.
Jack it up. But here we are now, Sydney, Melbourne, a softening. Would you say it's a softening market, or was it what's a little bit worse than a softening market?
It's a corrected market. So it's not a crash. We've had, according to CoreLogic numbers, Sydney's down 7.3%, Melbourne's down 5.1%. So that's not a crash. It's simply a correction. It's a natural part of the property cycle we're going through right now. So, and I think, I think that number, or that number I've just quoted, I've seen some suburbs that's already gone down 10 to 12 or even 15%. So I think a large percentage of the discount has already happened. I think there's some figures out from Domain today talking about where the Sydney market's going to go, but no one's going to ring a bell, Phil, and say, look, the market's now hit the bottom. No one's going to actually say, look, the market's going to hit the bottom on the 19th of February 2019. It'll be an historical look back, and that's where we hit the bottom of the market. My advice to buyers out there is to do your research, buy when you can afford to buy, but particularly in what we're going through now, a softening market, it's important that you don't overpay. It's very easy for buyers think they're getting a good discount because I paid less than 2018 or 2017 prices, but it's very easy to overpay in this market. So we're advising buyers out there, be very cautious what you pay, take your time, research well, but if you do find a quality property in the right location, make an offer and get it done and grab it.
So the question then, how to take advantage in a cooling market? What do you got to do? So you've spoken about, as part of your DNA, you do it for a living, but some pretty sophisticated tactics there. Buy the right property at the right price if you can afford it. Well, what is the right property at the right price in a cooling market, right? So how do you actually arm and gear yourself so you can take advantage of this market?
Well, I think the first thing is always go back to your goals. You know, what do your goals feel like? Is it you're buying for a home or investment? But let's say you're buying a home. Let's say you're upgrading. And actually right now is a really good time to consider upgrading, because what you lose on the sale of your existing property, you more than make up for on the buy side of your next property. So we think that home buyers at the moment have a really good opportunity to upgrade and get into the market. So my first bit of advice is set your goal, set your direction, know your target market, and buy in those suburbs. Even if you're buying for a home, it's like an investment. You know, it's your biggest asset. Buy in an area that's perhaps being gentrified. It's got the right access to shops, schools, transport, got all those key parameters that you look for in investment properties as well. So if you know the suburbs that are going to perform well and have performed well in the past, they're going to have the right drivers in place. So consider the suburbs, buy in those areas. Once you've got your suburbs nailed down, then it's a matter of shortlisting and searching. You know, it's about getting out there on your bike every weekend, having a look at properties. And I guess I've got a trained eye to know what to look for. I'm always looking for things I can add value to. For number one, it's location, but then it's about adding value to that property. So if it's on a large block of land, perhaps I can extend upward or out the side. Perhaps I could even split the block if it's a subdivisible block. So now it's about finding the right properties that are going to meet my brief. And I think a lot of people give up after a couple of weeks or months. They think, oh, the right property's just not coming up. I'm too tired. I just can't find it. I'll just wait till the market drops a bit more. But remember, there's always competition out there. Even in a softer market, there's perhaps a lot less competition now, which is great. So that's where I think you can take advantage, particularly right now. We're here in December, you know, before Christmas, over the holiday period. Great time to be buying. You know,
I've got some really good buys during this period, just before Christmas, because people start getting a bit desperate, right?
Absolutely.
You know,
you got motivated vendors, and you've got motivated buyers as well. I bought my home just 2 days before Christmas many years ago. It was fantastic. Just put in an offer. I didn't think I'd get it accepted. There you go.
Yeah. So you're talking about how to get yourself ready for this, to capitalise on a softening or cooling market. Everyone's going, that sounds good, Rich. Cool. All right, I get that. Give me some suburbs of what they're saying. I could hear them now. Tell us where to do this. What do you got for us? Any inside read on any particular suburbs or types of suburbs that people should be looking at?
Well, we can talk, absolutely happy to share specific suburbs, but I think more types of suburbs. I mean, again, it comes back to the brief. I mean, it's not a one size fits all, you know. So
we're talking about investment, not owner occupied.
Okay,
So
if we're talking about investors, then I'd look for suburbs that are going to be gentrified. I think, you know, places like Marrickville's often been talked about, Newtown, Enmore. It's a little suburb that not many people know about, Enmore. It's got the Enmore Theatre, right?
Yeah, I know Enmore Theatre.
Yeah, okay. A lot of people are going to fancy.
I hate driving along that road, whatever it's called. It's a miserable place, but
but those little pockets, for example, there's some great opportunities to renovate in those sort of areas.
Are you talking sort of old terrace type places?
Terraces, exactly. Yeah. Another cracking area is St. Peter's, not far from Mascot. But my good friend Peter Kalouzos, the property professor, he talks about.
Been on the show.
Perfect. Yeah. He'll probably tell you his 3 Ps, you know, people, place and property. And it's a very simple formula. So you look at the demographics of an area, look who's moving in, who's moving out. You want to be targeting places that are, with terms of people that have got a higher disposable income. You know, places that have already been or still being gentrified, like Alexandria or Redfern, still so close to the city, but still got plenty of opportunity. They're the kind of things that I'd be looking for. I mean, again, the price tag of those sort of areas is quite expensive. You know, someone with $500,000, it's going to be hard to get into those markets. So you've got to consider suburbs a lot further out from Sydney.
What about Brizzy?
Look, we really like Brisbane. Obviously, we stay away from off-the-plan units right in the centre of town, unless you're buying there for an absolute want to get a bargain.
Yeah.
But houses in Brisbane going well. Places like Deception Bay, Rothwell, where the train line goes out through to Kippering. Yep. I think that's going to perform well and is performing well.
Is that 2 stops back from Kippering, Roswell?
Rothwell.
Yeah,
you got Redcliffe on the peninsula, and then you got Clontarf, Kippering, Rothwell. Yeah, and you got Mango. It's called Mango Hill. And then you got the North Lakes shopping centre there. But that sort of area, I think, has got good potential. Just around the Moreton Bay area there is really good. Where else do we think? I still think the Loganshire, particular pockets. I mean, it's got 60 suburbs, but we're still very actively buying in those areas there, buying established homes, sort of between that 300, 400, 420 mark, adding a granny flat. We're getting some great yields when we do that strategy, between 7 and 8% as a combined yield in that area.
A different market in Brisbane to Sydney and Melbourne in that it's not really cooling. It's just good, steady CPI type, 3, 4, 5% increase. But everyone's sitting around waiting for this substantial shift.
Well, you're not going to get the same. You don't have the same drivers in Brisbane for massive capital growth as you've had in Sydney and Melbourne. See, the reason that Sydney and Melbourne boomed so much because there was a huge pent up demand. I remember doing my seminars back 10 years ago, and I used to put up a chart by ANZ Bank which talked about the undersupply situation within New South Wales. About 10 years ago, we were undersupplied in New South Wales by around 60,000 dwellings per annum. So we were supposed to be building around 60,000 dwellings. We're building around 30,000 a year.
So just compounding, getting worse.
It's just
and
compounding.
worse.
So that deficit got to a really high thing. Then we had cheap credit, interest rates low. Boom. As Louis Christopher calls it, the mother of all property booms. It's been and gone, right? So now we've still got low interest rates. The deficit in terms of supply is down to about 15,000. So we've kind of halved that deficit. So that's a good thing. But it's still going to keep bubbling away under there as more migrants come in, as we have natural population increase. Sydney is a jobs mecca, just like Melbourne is a jobs mecca. There is a significant population boost predicted for Melbourne, even slightly higher than Sydney at some point. Yeah. But when you look at the population numbers that's expected for Sydney and Melbourne, it just far outstrips anywhere else in the country.
So Melbourne suburbs then, that you like?
Melbourne
Softening market?
Softening market. Oh, look where I like in Melbourne. Doncaster, I quite like. Where else? Preston, Paran. Where else do I like in there, Melbourne?
He's been a bit cagey here.
No, I'm trying to think. It's not my hometown. Sydney's my hometown.
Sydney's
yeah. But look, anywhere that's, again, on the tram line, on the train line, got good access routes, easy access routes to the city. I really like Melbourne transport. It's much more efficient than Sydney, much easier to get to and from, but it doesn't have the quality of the beaches.
Here we're going to get a light rail in 2050 or something.
Oh yeah, probably sometime, mate, when the contractors eventually wake up and roll out of bed and do some work. It's another 18 months away. 18 months.
It's not cool. And all those people, the biggest problem is the small businesses affected along those lines down through Kingswood and even like on George Street. They're getting absolutely hammered.
Decimated. They're decimated their businesses. I mean, and what compensation are they getting? It's
nothing. I'm sure they're told that once there's going to be rivers of people using this thing and they'll all be coming for lattes.
Well, their business has died in the meantime, which is terrible.
Yeah, I know, there's a lot of flack about that. But so the question then, Rich, Brizzy, we spoke about that briefly. Sydney, Melbourne, softening markets. Brisbane, steady as you go. Tassie, you a fan of Tassie?
Look, I've been and gone. I do love Tassie as a destination. I love bushwalking. I've done a lot of the walks down there. Beautiful, beautiful part of the world. Just fantastic. Yeah. But in terms of investing there, I think if you're going to invest there now, you've missed the boat.
Yep.
My only concern about buying right now, or even those who've just bought very recently, is just the volume of investors that have bought there. I like to buy in markets where there's a higher percentage of owner-occupiers. Because if all the investors suddenly hit the skids, if we do have, heaven forbid, if we do have a recession and all of those investors that have bought there suddenly sell at the same time, who's going to buy their properties? Yeah. So it needs to be a self-sustaining market, which has, very long prospects for job growth. I don't think the rate of job growth in Tasmania is nearly as high as what you're going to get in other capital cities. So that's where I'd be very cautious.
I agree. And we may as well, while we're sort of going around the grounds, Adelaide and Perth. Adelaide
is a great little underperformer in the sense that it typically sort of goes along with CPI. Again, slow population growth, very livable city. I couldn't tell you specific suburbs. I'd have to refer to my buyer's agent colleagues who operate in that city. Yeah, again, it's one of those sort of cities that tends to fly under the radar, but just has a nice little trick. If you look at the charts of capital growth, it just tends to trickle up.
Steady as you go.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Perth, we all know, is sort of had its challenges over the last period of time, and I hear talk about sort of green shoots of recovery underway. Your view?
Yeah, my view. Look, again, I don't know how far it's going to bounce. Yeah, there's been talk of the 1% to 3% rise in prices. Again, because it's so heavily linked to the resources sector. Again, I just issue caution about that market, about getting your hopes up too high in that market. Don't just buy there because it's showing a 1% or 2% rebound. Again, buy in those cities that have got long-term fundamental growth drivers.
So the question then, is it the right time to invest?
Look, is it the right time to invest? I guess I refer to what I call the vacuum theory. I like to do a bit of the contrarian investor. I like to be investing when other people aren't investing because, one, I have a lot less competition. Two, I've got the ability to invest when others haven't. And I know I'm going to pick up much better pricing. So if you don't go and spend your money on property investment in 2019, you'll probably spend it on something else. Like you might upgrade your car. Again, depreciating asset. You might upgrade your sound system, your new 70-inch TV. What are they going to be worth in 5 years' time?
Yeah. You went over and you'll chuck them out.
Exactly,
right?
You'll be taking the tip and recycle them in the electronic tip. But if you go and spend your money on quality investment property, and you nurture it, it will nurture you in your retirement years.
So is it risky to invest we're talking about, it's hard again, markets to markets, but to generalise, Sydney and Melbourne, cooling markets, is it risky to invest in these markets right now, or with risk is opportunity?
Absolutely. It's not risky if you do it well. It's not risky if you pay the right price, if you do the right due diligence in picking the right areas and picking the right properties within those markets. So my view is that if you're going to be investing now, if you're paying the right price today, you'll do very well in 10 years' time. Even today, I did a presentation this morning and I picked out I think it was done by finder.com.au. They did a prediction of what property prices will be in the year 2050. And when they extrapolate the Sydney and Melbourne house prices, guess what the number is?
Don't know.
Any idea? $6 million. So
in 2050?
In 2050. We're talking 30 years' time. So can you...
the median?
The median house price.
It's going to be $6 million.
$6 million. Does that freak you out? It freaks my kids out, I tell you.
That's crazy, isn't it?
But I mean, can you imagine, we're now 2018. Back in the year 2000, what was the median price in Sydney?
Oh, you pushed me. I reckon 210.
It's about 250,000.
250. Yeah.
So, and then you fast forward another 10 years, it was 550,000. Today in Sydney, it's about 1,050,000.
Yeah.
So we think these numbers are never going to come to fruition, but they eventually do because of compound growth, because of population growth, because of infrastructure. All those things follow through. So it's kind of a question of, a lot of naysayers will go, oh, look, throw their hands up. The property market's got away on us. It's all just ridiculous. But those who participate and those who invest smartly, and a lot of the people on your show will be doing this, they've got multiple properties, they've set themselves up for life.
Well, the thing is it now time to invest? If you think that the median price of Sydney is going to be $6 million in 2050, and I'll still be alive then, I hope.
Absolutely.
That's you're doing all right.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
You're doing all right. That's like proper generational wealth you can create right now.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of investors think they've got to have 10 or 15 properties in their portfolio. You don't need that many to retire. If you buy some, even 3 or 4 good quality properties, that can set you up for life. It's all about getting ones that you can sustainably hang on to. Don't buy a lemon that's going to keep costing you money. I think a lot of people who've bought, a dodgy off-the-plan type property in an outback town have done really...
dodgy off-the-plan property in an outback town.
That's what I'm saying. You know exactly what I'm saying, right? But anyone who's been, say, burnt by a spruiker, they've kind of had a bad experience. So I think it's really important that people, when they buy their first investment property, get advice. Whether they do it themselves or use someone else doesn't matter. But as long as they buy a property that sets them up to go forward to, replicate that and go forward.
Well, the important thing you said about a minute ago, that the word was participation. If you're not participating in this market, you're not going to get any benefit of the uplift in property moving forward, which is cool. So a lot of people get carried away with the noise around property. So this whole analysis paralysis thing where they get so much information, so therefore they never participate.
Yeah. By the way, I used to be one of those people. I was an economist in my past life, and to buy my first investment property, I had to have my arm twisted behind my back because it was like, I need to know the net return to 3 decimal places before I decide. Yeah. So I know I can relate to those people, but I'm beyond that now.
You're beyond that now because you've got to think about, keep your eye on the prize, right?
That's it.
So a lot of people get stuck and they never do anything. So if you're not in the game, you're just not going to be a participant, and therefore, hopefully, get this uplift in value. I can't see property game too far backwards in value here in Australia. So get in the game. But on that basis, you're talking about, you got macro, micro. You're an economist that talks about economy stuff. All these different forces that influence the state of the property markets. Some of that you can't control. Some of it's controlled by government and the government of the day. Some of that is done independent of government, irrespective of who's actually sitting in the chair in Canberra, your regulatory bodies who influence and shape the way in which our economy behaves and the cycles which it goes through. And by and large, they do a pretty good job. I don't hear too many people being too critical of the regulators, unless they're doing stuff that you don't particularly like. We're moving into an election year next year. A lot of people sort of get carried away with discussing what might and what might not happen. But when you think about 2050, this number you're talking about, median price of $6 million, it's probably not going to matter too much longer term what actually happens in this next period of time, what government comes in. Do you agree or disagree on that?
Look, I think I disagree because there's a lot of challenges for investors going forward. I mean, we've got a federal election next year sometime, and the big threat is obviously removal of negative gearing on existing property, not on brand new property. So that could have not a devastating impact, but a significant impact on the market. Yeah. I think regulatory bodies that control, have an impact on the market are very important. I mean, there's certain things that are obviously outside our control as investors, but I think you need to make decisions in an imperfect world. We have to decide to invest into property, regardless of whether we know interest rates are going to be at 1.5% or 3% in 3 years' time. We just have to manage the risks going forward. And I think that's where people fall into the trap of paralysis analysis. They think, gosh, I can't manage all the risk, therefore I do nothing. But do nothing is a decision as well. And do nothing actually means that you won't create wealth. And wealth through property investment has been a proven strategy and will continue to be a proven strategy going forward. And I think we've got a very strong banking system in Australia. We have a very robust economy, a very adaptable economy. So I think as much as the media makes out that, like a 60-minute story saying we could crash 40%, it'll rebound, even if it did crash 40%. We don't have the conditions for that, by the way, put them on the record, but even if it did, we'll rebound.
I completely agree with you, Rich. I was reading a thing in one of the online news outlets, one of the big ones. I won't say the name of it, but the journalist that wrote that, and I read it yesterday and I went, this journalist and that was a moron, is what I would say. They've got a piece of information. Right. They obviously didn't understand how property worked at all, and they tried to use one particular information they had to try and make an argument over here, and they had no idea at all. I just went, this is probably the worst piece of journalism I've ever seen. However, this is a really widely read publication. So you've got to be careful, right? Be really, really careful right now, because the property industry needs leadership, and it's got some good leadership within it. Sensibility needs to prevail. So just be really, really careful who you listen to right now is my point.
100%. I do probably 3 to 4 media interviews a week at the moment, and there's lots of, like you say, I do come across some really experienced journos, like the ones in the Fin Review, but there's also some very inexperienced journos, and I'll make a comment and they go, what do you mean by that? And I have to sort of unpack it. But I think the key for the message for our listeners out there is just to be very careful as to what they take as advice and what they take as gospel. I know, there's certain media commentators out there that will kind of spruik whatever angle they want to take, but you've actually got to look at reality. Look at the figures long term. Look at things like ABS data. Look at population growth. Don't just look at one statistic in isolation. I mean, even some really good companies like Biz Oxford now, they put out predictions for the next 3 years, right, on capital growth. People will look at that chart and go, oh, well, look, Brisbane's going to grow at 13% over the next 3 years. They will only invest in Brisbane. Look, I think Brisbane's a great area to invest, but I think look at property over a 10 to 20 year period. Look at statistics over a much longer period of time and understand what it's saying to you. So even in a flat market, you can still make money in Sydney right now. We're doing some strategies with our investors where we're doing some renovations and other duplex ideas, and they're making some great money going forward. So it's all about how you
different strategy for different markets.
Exactly,
is what it is.
Yeah.
So going back to the negative gearing situation, is there anyone within the property industry who has an interest in negative gearing as a tax bit of legislation being removed, or is the whole property industry behind the mantra that don't cut negative gearing as as it sits right now, because it will completely change the way in which it'll affect all Australians and the Australian economy? Is there any sectors that are pro get rid of it?
I think you'll see some economists that think it should be removed. I think what's his name, Saul Eastlake, I forget who he works for now, but I think he thinks negative gearing should be removed because he thinks it's just an unfair tax break. But I think negative gearing needs to be looked at. If they're going to play with it, they should change a whole lot of other tax structures, not just do negative gearing in isolation. Yeah, I think it's really unfair to a lot of the community who've gone down using negative gearing, and it's not just the wealthy who use it. There's a lot of mum and dad and other essential service people,
and that's been proven. There's been
absolutely
quite a lot of stuff around.
There's even articles today saying, "Oh, but there's a disproportionate of wealthy people." That's because they're on a disproportionately high income. But it's going to affect the mum and dad investors, unfortunately the most. But I think it should be looked at in its entirety as a whole tax reform process, because in my view, if they remove negative gearing, I think you'll start to see a rise in rents, because I believe it's cheaper for private citizens, the private sector, to provide housing for renters than it is for the public sector, the government, to provide housing. So I know there's lots of build to rent type of strategies around, and that's quite a difficult process. But if the government's going to provide more housing, it takes years and years for it to get off the ground. I think you'll also, if they bring in negative gearing for only brand new property, unfortunately the spruikers are going to have a field day. Yeah. They're going to feel like, buying
blank check, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's a government endorsed off the plan buying spree for a lot of people. So I
But
think
already that's how a lot of spruikers position their properties. They go, if you buy this, its upside potential is this if you use negative gearing as a inverted commas strategy, right?
Yeah, but you don't buy for the tax benefits.
No.
You know? I mean, the one benefit of getting rid of negative gearing is that it'll make people really look at the numbers and go, it's got to stack up on its own anyway. So I think it'll really dampen investment appetite going forward.
If you dampen investment appetite, you also dampen the owner-occupier market as well, right? The whole property market will be influenced.
Oh, it does. It also affects the construction industry. I mean, property in Australia, I think it's around a $6 trillion industry. So it has a huge impact on the whole economy. And if it slows, it potentially could sort of slide us into potentially a recession down the track.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a lot of people talking about this right now. It's not my. I'm just a conduit of information. So I'm apolitical. I'm pro-government. The government looks after Australia. They do a great job. So I'm sure there will be a sensibility in any decisions, any changes in Canberra over the coming sort of 12 months or so. Anyway, we'll leave that alone. Good, Rich. We've gone longer than what we thought we would.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. So it's big year for you. There's been TV shows.
It's been a tiring year. Yeah, TV shows and lots of deals done as well. And cool. Looking forward to next year. I think 2019 for me is going to be a year of opportunity. I'm hoping that the market sentiment will turn around. I think what you'll see next year in 2019 for both Sydney and Melbourne, that we will genuinely hit the bottom of the market. I'm putting my hands up doing the quotation marks at the moment. You can't see that on a podcast.
When's it going to be the bottom? Come on.
19th of February next year, mate.
Okay, exactly.
No, who knows exactly when it's going to be. But no one, as I said, no one rings a bell to say now's the bottom of the market. But I think you will see a lot more flurry of activity. An interesting stat that I saw was an ANZ chart talking about online searches for property. Dramatic spike. It's gone up more than ever before right now. So what does that indicate? People are looking at the market, right? The other index is the Westpac Consumer Confidence or Consumer Sentiment Survey. It's above 100 points, which means it's above parity, which means people are thinking now is the time to buy a dwelling. Yeah. So I think you'll start to see when people feel like there's a natural floor in the market, it's not going to drop much more. You know what? Even if I bought and I lost 1%, no big deal. I think that's when you're going to see a lot more activity in the property market.
So the key thing with this Sydney Melbourne markets is it's softening, call it what you will, but it's just a correction.
Yeah, it's a correction. And there's these windows, I've got to say, in the last 2 decades that I've been operating, there's very few times when it's an absolute buyer's market. This is one of them. If that's the message I can leave with the.
Is it a buyer's market now, or is it going to be a buyer's market in a couple of months' time?
Right now,
so get in.
Absolutely. Right now, December, January, great time to buy. But the first 6 months of next year, great buying opportunities. So you don't get those sort of opportunities every decade. The market will then go to a stabilisation phase, and then it will go to a recovery phase, and then start to increase in price again. So that's what I see is generally happening.
There you go. You heard it from Rich. He knows what's going on.
It's not foolproof. But
it's not foolproof.
But that's my view.
Yeah. Well, to the point around, but be a sponge for information right now, and just ensure you're getting your advice from someone who has your vested interest in mind and not lining their own pockets, and you can work it out pretty quickly by if you're having to open up your wallet to pay someone for advice. If you're getting free advice securing a property, it might not be so free. Anyway, we don't need to cover that now. We speak a lot about it, and there's plenty of stuff online, smartpropertyinvestment.com.au, if you want to explore this even more and make sure that you've got the right checklists in place to help you choose which advisor you want to use. Thanks for joining us. Remember, smartpropertyinvestment.com.au/subscribe. If you're not yet getting our daily morning newsletter, so you're the first to know what's happening in property right across Australia. Social media, Smart Property HQ, like us, follow us. It's a great way to also get information. And if you like what we're doing here, just press the subscribe button and therefore you'll never miss an episode. We'll be back again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.